Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into a really interesting one in the crypto space, Onyxcoin, that's XCN. And get this, there's this one analyst, Lee the Captain, who reckons XCN could actually hit $1.
Wow, okay.
$1.
But then on the flip side, in other sorts we looked at, it hints XCN might just, crash down to maybe 0.008.
Talk about extremes. That massive difference really just highlights how speculative this all is, doesn't it?
Totally.
So our goal today is really just to make sense of these, completely opposing views on XCN.
Right.
We've gathered quite a mix of sources, crypto news sites like Captain Altcoin, Disruption Banking, then analysis from Changelly, CoinStats, CoinGabar.
And we got some technical stuff too.
Yeah, exactly. A YouTube deep dive from Shah Faisal Shah, and even some chatter from a crypto Q&A forum. Lots of different angles.
Okay, so listener, our mission for you here is to cut through all that noise. We want you to understand the main arguments, both optimistic and, pessimistic for Onyxcoin, and pinpoint the key things these sources think will actually move the price.
Think of it as your fast track to getting up to speed on XCN. Okay, so let's dive in. There's a bullish $1 case from Lee the Captain. What's driving that?
Well, Lee the Captain's view seems to really hinge on XCN's place in a very specific market, payments and global trade finance. He basically argues that, apart from the big players like Ripple, Stellar, XDC, there's not a huge amount of direct competition right there.
Right, less competition. So if that niche market grows and, more regular investors jump into crypto, XCN could maybe grab a bigger piece of the pie.
That's the idea, precisely. He also brings up the whole Ripple versus SEC legal saga.
Ah, yeah.
His thinking is that case might have actually scared some developers away from this whole payments sector.
Interesting.
Which kind of indirectly could help existing projects like XCN. Keeps the field less crowded,
So the legal stuff acts like a barrier for newcomers. That makes sense. And he also talked about the wider crypto market, didn't he? Like XCN's fate is tied to Bitcoin and the rest.
Yeah, definitely. He points to people like Charles Hoskinson, Cardano's founder, being pretty optimistic about Bitcoin's future price.
Okay.
The thinking is, a rising tide lifts all boats. If Bitcoin does well, altcoins like XCN could benefit too.
Right.
Plus, Captain Altcoin really emphasizes just how massive these markets are. Payments, global trade finance, we're talking trillions.
Trillions, wow.
And he sees XCN as sort of uniquely positioned to tap into that huge potential.
Okay, massive market, not much direct competition, maybe a tailwind from the overall crypto market. But that $1 target, how does he justify that number? Seems ambitious.
He does try to ground it. He runs the numbers, basically. For XCN to hit $1, given its supply, it'd need a market cap around $30 billion.
Okay, market cap price times number of coins.
Yeah.
$30 billion. Big number.
It is. But then he compares it to Dogecoin's peak market value.
The meme coin comparison.
Right. His point isn't that XCN is Doge, but that a $30 billion valuation, while huge, isn't actually unprecedented in crypto. Things can get wild.
Yeah, wild is one word for it. It does give some context to how unpredictable crypto values can be sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, but let's definitely switch gears now. Disruption banking. They sound much more cautious. What are the red flags they're seeing?
Yeah, disruption banking is focusing more on the immediate concerns, sentiment, recent price action. They point out that analysts on TradingView mostly suggesting sell for XCN right now.
Ouch.
And more concretely, they highlight that big price drop. XCN spiked near $0 out cents in late January 2025.
I remember that.
Only to fall all the way back to around 0.01 Thien by mid-March. That kind of sharp reversal suggests buying pressure just didn't stick around.
That is a pretty steep fall. And didn't that happen around the time of their big mainnet launch? The Goliath mainnet?
Yeah.
You'd expect that to be positive.
You would, wouldn't you? But disruption banking makes a good point. Any major tech rollout, especially mainnet, the full operational blockchain, can have, teething problems, early glitches, unexpected issues.
Yeah, that's true.
And those early hiccups can definitely create uncertainty, volatility in the short term.
So the thing meant to build confidence might actually cause some jitters initially.
Yeah.
Okay. What else were they worried about?
Maybe the biggest concern they flagged relates to rumors, which apparently came from Bean Crypto, about whales, large holders potentially selling off a huge chunk, like maybe 50% of their XCN.
50%? Wow.
Yeah. And obviously, huge sell orders like that can hammer the price. Plus, it just creates negative buzz, bad sentiment.
For sure.
Which leads to that warning they mentioned. a potential drop down to 0.008 if things don't pick up.
Okay, that definitely paints a much gloomier picture.
Yeah.
Big players getting out is never a good sign for market confidence.
No.
But the disruption banking piece wasn't all negative, was it? Didn't they mention some ongoing stuff?
That's right, yeah. Amidst the bearish signals, they do acknowledge that the Onyxcoin ecosystem isn't dead. There's still activity. Well, there's talk on X, Twitter, about maybe bringing in liquid staking.
Okay. Earn rewards, but still tradable.
Exactly. And apparently an upcoming wallet, some kind of points system called the XCN ledger points. And they also note the community seems pretty engaged still, despite the price going up and down. That suggests, a baseline of support for the project.
So kind of a mixed bag then. Short-term worries, but still development happening and a community sticking around. Okay, let's dig into the technicals now. Faisal Shah on YouTube. He had an analysis in early May 2025. What did he see?
Faisal Shah was really focused on key price levels. He saw dropping below 0.011 cents as a pretty big deal, a bad sign.
Okay.
Based on his look at the daily candles, how the price moved each day, he said if it closed below 0.014 cents for 2 days straight,
right,
the chance of it dropping further down towards 0.0145 jumped to like 70%.
70% chance of another drop. Oof.
Yeah, and he even mentioned lower targets after that. 0.01 cents, maybe even an 80% drop overall.
Wow, 80%, that's significant.
Yeah.
Did he see any potential bright spots? Any signs of a turnaround?
He did mention one possibility, a potential new support level around 0.0165.
Okay.
He suggested if the price did fall to his 0.0145 target, but then bounced back up and broke through 0.0165, that could be a bullish sign.
Like buyers stepping back in.
Exactly. It might show strength returning, but unless that happened, his outlook was definitely still bearish, expecting more downside.
Okay, so very level focused,
Right.
Watching those daily closes. Now, CoinStats also did some technical analysis. What were they seeing? Patterns, indicators?
CoinStats flagged a descending triangle pattern on the XCN chart.
Descending triangle, that's usually bearish.
Often, yeah. It suggests the price might keep heading down, especially if it breaks below the bottom line of the triangle.
Okay.
When they looked, XCN was around 0.01645. They saw potential resistance places, selling might pick up at 0.1219 and way higher at 0.75.
And support, where buyers might step in?
Support levels they identified were 0.0146, which is close to Faisal Shah's target, and then a much lower bearish target at 0.001.
Wow, that's a huge potential range they're mapping out there. What about the indicators they looked at? Did those lean bearish too?
Several did, yeah. The 50-day moving average, kind of a trend indicator, was above the price. That's usually seen as bearish.
Yeah.
The RSI, Relative Strength Index, suggested XCN might be oversold.
Meaning maybe due for a short-term bounce?
Possibly, yeah. A temporary bounce, but it doesn't automatically mean the whole trend is reversing. And they also saw weak trading volume.
Which isn't great. Suggests lack of conviction.
Pretty much. Lack of strong belief behind the price moves.
So mostly bearish signals there too, aside from that maybe oversold hint. Anything else from CoinStats indicators?
Well, interestingly, they did note strong trend momentum based on the ADX indicator and high volatility from the RVI.
So strong trend, high volatility, but leaning down. Sounds like a bumpy ride.
Could be, yeah. Expect significant swings. And another interesting point from CoinStats, they mentioned XCN's price action looked pretty similar to Bitcoin's and Ethereum's patterns recently.
Ah, that is key. If it's just tracking the big guys, then the whole market direction is going to be crucial for XCN.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's shift to CoinGobar. Their analysis seemed a bit more upbeat, didn't it?
It did, yeah. CoinGobar, though we don't have the exact date, talked about a pretty significant recent recovery for XCN.
Recovery. How much?
They mentioned a surge of over 1,200% in just a month at one point, and a more recent climb back above $0.03 thousand after dipping.
Okay, that's quite a bounce back. What patterns were they seeing?
They spotted a symmetrical triangle on the 4-hour chart. Now, unlike the descending one.
Right, that one's bearish.
A symmetrical triangle can break out either way, up or down. But given the recent upward moves they saw, they felt a break upwards was more likely.
Okay. Where did they see it potentially going?
Their targets were back in that 0.045 to 0.05 CES range, levels it hadn't seen since that spike back in late January.
So, potential to regain those highs. What was fueling that optimism for them?
CoinGabar pointed to what they saw as strong investor confidence, even though the price had dropped on a weekly basis recently.
Okay.
And they also highlighted analysis from someone called Natalie Dormer. She apparently saw bullish patterns on the shorter-term 1-hour chart.
Like what?
A reverse head and shoulders and a bullish flag. Both patterns usually suggest potential upward movement.
Right.
So Dormer was anticipating a push towards $0.03400, maybe higher, if the buying volume held up.
Okay, so bullish chart patterns plus perceived investor confidence from CoinGabar's side. They also seemed pretty positive about the XCN Ledger launch, right?
He really did. They framed the XCN Ledger launch as a major plus, described it as a Layer 3 network running under the main Onyx protocol.
Layer 3, okay. What are the key features?
They highlighted things like low transaction fees, really fast confirmations near instant, and this EIP 1559 integration.
EIP 1559. That's the Ethereum thing for more predictable gas fees.
Exactly. And crucially, XCN itself is the native token for this new network, the gas token.
So you need XCN to actually use the XCN Ledger. Gives it a clear utility.
Precisely. And beyond that, CoinGabar pointed out a deflationary burn mechanism built into the ledger.
Meaning some XCN gets destroyed with transactions.
That's right. A portion of the fees paid in XCN gets permanently removed from circulation, burned.
Which theoretically could boost the price long term. Less supply.
Yeah, basic supply and demand. If demand stays steady or grows and the supply shrinks over time, that could definitely put upward pressure on the price. Makes the remaining coins potentially more valuable.
Makes sense. Okay, so considering all these different tastes, bullish, bearish, technical, fundamental, that's the actual price predictions. Changelly had some forecasts. What did they see for 2025?
Changelly was actually pretty conservative for 2025, especially compared to that $1 idea.
How conservative?
They saw XCN trading in a pretty tight range for most of the year. Low end around 0.0002 cents, high end maybe 0.000029, average like 0.00026.
Wow, okay. That's way lower than where it was trading in some of those early May analyses we mentioned. What about longer term? Did they see it picking up eventually?
They did, yeah. Their longer view was more optimistic, but still gradual. By 2030, they predicted an average around 0.1 or 162.
Okay.
Looking way out to 2040, they projected an average of $1.27. And their furthest guess, 2050, was an average of $1.81.
So cautious near term, but maybe significant growth over decades, according to them.
Okay.
Interesting. What about CoinStats? They also made predictions, right?
Yeah, CoinStats offered a wider range for 2025. Their bullish case went up to about 0.030302.
Okay, closer to recent highs.
But their bearish outlook went all the way down to that 0.0030 level we saw in their technicals.
Big difference.
And they even threw out a pretty bold statement that XCN might reach $5 soon.
Soon. Okay, that's bullish. What about further out?
They gave bullish targets like $11.07 for 2026, 0 and 9 for 2027, hitting that $1 mark in 2028, then $1.03 in 29 and $1.05 by 2030. But again, alongside those very, very low bearish possibilities too.
So CoinStats seems to be hedging their bets a bit, but definitely sees significant upside potential in their optimistic view. And CoinGabar, they were pretty bullish all along, weren't they?
Yes, CoinGabar kept that optimistic tone going into their long-term predictions. For 2025, they suggested XCN could get past 0.1860.
Okay, 18 cents. That's getting closer to its old all-time high.
Right. And then looking further out, they predicted maybe $1 by 2030.
$1 by 2030.
And then really ambitious targets after that. $5 to $10 by 2040, and maybe even $20 to $50 by 2050.
$20 to $50. Wow. Okay. Those are some extremely optimistic long-term views. It just really drives home the massive spread in opinions, doesn't it?
Absolutely. All over the map.
So if we look across everything we've discussed, what are the main things everyone seems to agree will influence XCN's price, say, in 2025 and beyond? What keeps coming up?
Yeah, several key themes definitely emerge. First, just general market sentiment. Is crypto overall bullish or bearish? That's huge.
Always is.
Then technological progress is critical. Did the Goliath mainnet launch smoothly? Is the XCN ledger actually getting used? That adoption piece is key.
Right, real-world use cases.
Exactly. Competition in that payments and trade finance space is another big one. How does XCN stack up? Broader economic conditions also play a role, even if indirectly, like through Bitcoin's performance.
And regulations.
Yep, regulations are always looming. The Ripple case is just one example of how that can shake things up.
Okay.
And then, of course, the stuff specific to trading XCN, investor confidence, how much is being traded, volume, what are the big whale wallets doing, and all those technical patterns we talked about.
It's definitely a complex mix, a lot of moving parts influencing the price. So based on this snapshot from, say, early May 2025, what's the general state of XCN according to these sources?
Well, the price seemed to be bouncing around roughly between 0.013 and 0.013, give or take, depending on the source and exact timing.
Okay.
Market cap estimates varied too, somewhere between maybe $500 million and over $900 million.
And the supply. How many coins are out there?
There is a slight discrepancy there, actually. Some sources said around 32.6 billion XCN. Another mentioned closer to 27.9 billion in circulation.
Okay. Data differences aren't uncommon in crypto.
No. And trading volume was apparently fluctuating quite a bit, big ups and downs.
And just for context, what were the all-time highs and lows?
All-time high was back in May 2022, around 0.1841. The all-time low was much more recent, October 2023, down at 0.00007. So it's seen massive swings before.
Okay, definitely a volatile history. So as we wrap up this deep dive on Onyxcoin, what are the key things you, our listener, should really take away from all this?
I think the main takeaway is just how uncertain XCN's future looks right now. It's really polarized. We've heard arguments for potentially huge growth.
Right, based on its niche, the tech like XCN Ledger, maybe positive market vibes.
Exactly. But we've also seen serious red flags. The recent price drops, those whale sell-off rumors, some bearish technicals pointing lower. So how well that Goliath mainnet performs, how much traction the XCN Ledger gets, those are going to be absolutely critical things to watch, along with market sentiment and those technical levels.
And just remember, this is all information from a specific point in time. Crypto moves fast.
Extremely fast. And it's inherently volatile and speculative.
Absolutely. So for you, the learner, this deep dive gives you a map of the different viewpoints right now. But staying updated, doing your own research as things evolve, that's absolutely crucial if you want to form your own informed opinion on Onyxcoin.
Which really leads to a final thought for you to chew on. You've heard these ambitious long-term price targets, right? Up to $1, $5, even $50 way down the line.
Yeah, huge numbers.
But you've also heard the immediate concerns, the potential for significant drops. So the question is, what realistically needs to happen technologically in terms of adoption, in market sentiment for XCN to actually bridge that massive gap and achieve that kind of sustained major growth, especially in this super competitive DeFi world?